It's in your mind when you wake up. As you work, you imagine conversations that never happened. At night, before going to sleep, you relive every message, every look, every detail. Sounds like true love, doesn't it? That intensity that takes over you, that need to know where he is, with whom, what he feels for you. But what if I told you that this is not love? And if this obsession that consumes you, that makes you check your cell phone compulsively, that turns your days into an emotional roller coaster, was something completely different? Carl Jung revealed something profound about the female soul. Often, what we feel as overwhelming love is just the mirror of parts of ourselves that we don't want to face. When you can't get someone out of your head, it's not the one you really want. It's something much deeper, more revealing, and absolutely transformative about who you are. What you discover now can forever change how you relate to each other. The shadow you cast on him. Jung discovered something disturbing about how our mind works. Everything you don't accept in yourself, you end up seeing in others. He called it a shadow. It is that part of you that has been rejected, hidden, denied from very early in life. And when you meet someone who awakens this overwhelming obsession, it's usually because they're carrying qualities from their own shadow without you even realizing it. Think about it calmly. Maybe he's extremely sure of himself, and you've never allowed yourself to be that way. Maybe he is free, spontaneous, lives without caring about judgments while you have spent your whole life policing yourself, controlling yourself, fearing what others will think. Maybe he expresses anger easily, sets limits without guilt, and you've swallowed every hurt since you were a child because you learned that women can't impose themselves. What really fascinates you about it isn't the self. It's the part of yourself that you've never had the courage to live fully. The unconscious mind works in a very specific way. It seeks in the external world what has been lost internally. You look at it and see everything you could be but never were, all the possibilities you abandoned along the way, all the authenticity you sacrificed to fit in. This is not healthy admiration. It is despair disguised as passion. It is your psyche's attempt to become whole again through another person, using them as a bridge to forgotten parts of you. The problem is that this creates an absolutely devastating emotional dependency. You start needing it like it's oxygen. Each message from him gives you a sense of life. Each silence kills you inside little by little. But it's not the one you really love. It's the version of yourself that you unconsciously project onto it. She is the brave, free, intense, authentic woman you never allowed yourself to be because you were afraid of being rejected. When you finally understand this mechanism, you realize that you have spent months, perhaps entire years, in love with a complete illusion, by a distorted reflection of who you really are underneath all the layers of social conditioning, all the masks you've learned to wear. He has become, unknowingly, the bearer of everything you have rejected in yourself over the years. Your genuine strength, your natural sensuality, your legitimate anger, your essential freedom. And here's the most painful insight of all. The more you reject these parts of yourself, the more intensely you'll pursue people who possess them. You'll call it irresistible chemistry, deep connection, true and destined love. But it is only your shadow crying out desperately to be seen, accepted, finally integrated into your consciousness. The real solution is not to win it over. It was never about that. It is to reconquer oneself. It is to bring back from internal exile all those parts that you buried alive because someone once said that they were too much, inadequate, wrong, unfit for a woman. When you do this difficult but necessary work, something absolutely magical happens. The obsession simply disappears like mist in the sun. It is no longer irresistible because you no longer need it to feel complete, whole, alive. You realize then that you've been chasing your own shadow all along, and you can finally stop chasing the wind. You can rest, she can go back home, then into herself. The void. You try to fill with him. There is a hole inside you, an emptiness that hurts when you stop to feel. Maybe it's been there since childhood, since when you didn't receive the love you needed, to the extent you needed it in the way you needed it. Maybe it was dug in slowly, each time you abandoned yourself to please others, each time you silenced your voice to keep the peace, each time you gave up your dreams to take care of everyone but you. Maybe it's so old that you don't even remember when you started anymore, but it's there, pulsating, hurting, asking for attention. Then he shows up in your life, and for a magical moment, the emptiness disappears completely. Finally, you feel fulfilled, alive, whole, real. But this is not love. It is temporary anesthesia. It's the desperate attempt to use someone else as medicine to plug a hole that only you can truly fill. Jung was talking about exactly this when he described the neurotic search for the other. It is not a genuine search for true connection. It is a terrified escape from itself. Every time you think about it compulsively, you're actually running away from the inner emptiness that terrifies you to face. Because if you stopped thinking about it for a moment, you would have to feel what you have been avoiding all your life. The deep, frightening feeling of being incomplete, of missing something essential. And therein lies the real danger. You turn that person into medicine for your existential pain. It becomes the only reason for your happiness, the reason you wake up, the meaning of your life. But no one can carry this absurd weight. No human being can fill a void that not even you can face head-on. And when he inevitably fails in that impossible mission that you assigned him without him knowing, you despair even more, sink deeper. The crudest truth is this: you don't really love him, you need him. You are dependent, and need disguised as love is the perfect recipe for absolutely toxic and destructive relationships. You become dependent on his validation, his physical presence, his constant attention, his emotional crumbs. Without all this, you literally fall apart. Because without it, you'd have to finally look inward and face emptiness head-on. But this emptiness is not his enemy. He never was. It is a sacred invitation, an insistent call from your soul for you to finally turn inward and do the deep work that no one can do for you, that no one can ever do in your place. It is your psyche screaming louder and louder. Stop, looking outside for what only exists inside. Come home. Emptiness is showing you in the way it can that you have lost your way through life, that at some crucial moment you gave up on yourself and began to live through others, begging for love, accepting crumbs, that you have completely outsourced your happiness, your self-esteem, your sense of self-worth. And now the bill has arrived, with interest. Filling this void is an exclusively inner work. No one does it for you. It means reconnecting deeply with who you really are, not who you were taught you should be. It means nurturing yourself with the same passionate devotion that you dedicate to him. It means learning to sit with the discomfort, with the frightening emptiness without running desperately into someone's arms so as not to feel it. When you finally do it, when you face the void and find that you can survive it, you realize something liberating. You never needed it. You were just so completely disconnected from yourself that you thought he was the answer. But the answer has always been in you. It always has been. If you want to stop seeking in others what only exists within yourself, the Jung method will show you the way back to yourself. The link is in the first pinned comment. Let's continue. The fantasy that replaced the real man. You're not really in love with him. You're madly in love with the version of him that you've carefully created in your head. There is the real man, with obvious defects, clear limitations, human contradictions. And then there's the fantasy man, perfect, idealized, tailor-made to fulfill all your unfulfilled dreams, all your unfulfilled expectations. And it's exclusively this imaginary man you're obsessed with. Jung called this the imago. It is the internal image that you carry within yourself, slowly built from childhood, from your first experiences with important figures. Maybe it's the idealized image of the father you wanted to have but never had, or the perfect hero from the movies you've watched dozens of times, or the Prince Charming of fairy tales who completely shaped her female psyche since she was a child. The devastating problem is that you took this powerful internal image and pasted it on his face. You see only what you want to see. It systematically ignores all glaring warning signs. Mentally rewrite his attitude so that they make sense in his romantic narrative. He says a completely vague sentence and you build a whole castle of deep meanings on top of that. He disappears for days without giving any news, and you invent 1,000 noble justifications to protect the image you have created. This fantasy is so incredibly powerful that you can spend months, even entire years, in an emotional relationship with someone who simply doesn't exist in reality. While the real man is right there in front of you, showing you exactly who he is through his actions, you are completely blind, seeing only the idealized projection you have created. And the more the raw reality contradicts the perfect fantasy, the more you desperately strive to keep the illusion alive, to not let the dream die. Why do we do this so often? Because fantasy protects us from painful truths. It saves us from facing the devastating disappointment, the frightening loneliness, the painful truth that maybe this isn't the right man, that maybe you're wasting precious time. Fantasy allows us to keep waiting indefinitely, daydreaming, believing against all evidence, even when all the evidence screams exactly the opposite. But there is a very high price in all this. You live in a constant, exhausting state of anxiety because reality stubbornly insists on not cooperating with your mental script. It acts in ways that don't fit the narrative you've written. He repeatedly disappoints the character you created for him to play. And every time this happens, you suffer intensely. You blame yourself. You try to understand where you went wrong. Obsession feeds on exactly this painful gap between fantasy and reality. His mind works nonstop, 24 hours a day, trying to make the incompatible pieces fit together somehow, trying to turn the real imperfect man into the ideal man you imagined. It's absolutely exhausting mental work that happens all the time, even when you finally fall asleep. And while you're completely busy loving a fantasy, you totally lose the ability to see who it really is. You miss out on the valuable chance to have a real, true relationship with an imperfect but present and available human being. Because real relationships require you to see the person exactly as they are, not as you desperately want them to be. Waking up from this elaborate fantasy is extremely painful. It's like waking up from an absolutely beautiful dream and realizing that you're alone in the cold bed. But it is also profoundly liberating, because only when you let go of fantasy, definitively can you finally see reality as it is. And only in harsh reality, not in comforting illusion, is there a genuine possibility of true love. When you think about it, it becomes an obsession. Do you realize that you can't stop? No matter what he does, how much he tries to distract himself, he is always there, invading your thoughts while you work, appearing in every song that plays, present in every awkward silence. This is not love at all, it is pure mental compulsion. And compulsion always clearly indicates that something is completely out of control within you, not outside. Jung deeply understood that obsessive thoughts are symptoms, never causes. They point like arrows to something much deeper that you don't want to face at all. When your mind fixates on someone in an absolutely obsessive way, it's usually because there's a much greater anxiety, a much older wound, an infinitely deeper fear that you're desperately trying to avoid. Thinking about it becomes an unconscious and automatic ritual, an efficient way to distract yourself from the real life that you are not really living, of the important dreams you abandoned along the way, of the terrifying emptiness that you don't want to feel at all. It's much easier, more comfortable to obsess over it than to look honestly at your own existence and ask the really hard questions. Why am I so completely lost? Why did I give so much power to someone like that? Obsession also gives you a false and dangerous sense of control over the situation. If you can meticulously decipher their every move, accurately predict every move, perfectly understand every prolonged silence, you may be able to control the end result. Maybe you can somehow ensure that he loves you back. But this is a completely pure illusion. You're not in control of anything. You're completely hostage to your own uncontrolled mind. And here's the cruelest detail of all. The more you think obsessively, the less you really feel. You are eternally trapped in endless and exhausting mental analyses, elaborate theories about what he thinks or feels, while completely disconnecting from your own real and legitimate emotions. You're so intensely busy interpreting every minimal message that you completely forget to ask yourself the most important question. But am I genuinely happy about this? The obsessive mind is always a mind that flees in despair. She runs frantically in endless circles so she doesn't have to stop and face the naked truth. And the truth is usually quite simple and extremely painful. You are completely alone in this whole fantasy. You are intensely loving a version of him that may not even exist in reality. You're building an absolutely entire relationship inside your head while real life quickly passes by on the outside. But obsession is terribly addictive, like any drug. It gives you something concrete to do, to think about, to feel at all times. It completely fills empty and frightening time. It makes you feel intensely alive, even if it's exclusively through chronic anxiety and constant suffering. And every time you consciously try to stop, the mind automatically runs back to it, as if it were literally the only thing that really matters in the entire world. Breaking this vicious cycle requires absolutely brutal awareness. It requires you to recognize without mercy. This is not true love, it is pure anxiety. This is not real connection, it is unhealthy compulsion. And compulsion always points directly to parts of you that urgently need deep healing, not someone else to complete them. When you finally let go for real, when you stop feeding the obsessive thoughts with your attention for good, something absolutely amazing happens naturally. You realize to your surprise that you can breathe freely again. May your mind finally rest in peace, that you exist fully beyond it. And that's the first truly real step toward genuine freedom. The fear of not being chosen. Underneath all this overwhelming obsession is an absolutely primal terror. What if you're just not good enough? What if he looks at you and coldly decides that it's not worth it? This deep fear of not being chosen is at the painful root of everything, and it's infinitely more about yourself than it's about it. Jung would say without hesitation that this fear comes from an extremely deep wound in his fundamental self-image. At some crucial point in your life, you've completely internalized the devastating message that you constantly need to prove yourself. That love is something you earn hard, not something you deserve simply for existing. And now you carry that limiting belief like a life sentence. So every minute interaction with him instantly becomes a definitive test. Every message he sends or fails to send becomes concrete evidence of his value or his complete inadequacy. You obsessively interpret every gesture as if it were a final verdict on who you really are. And you live in a constant and exhausting state of judgment, anxiously waiting to be approved or definitively rejected. But look at the cruel trap. By making him the supreme judge of your worth, you give away all your personal power. You become an absolute hostage of opinion, of variable mood, of his eventual choice. Your self-esteem swings violently according to the attention he gives or takes away from you. You're no longer in the least bit in charge of your own life. You're living eternally in the audience, desperately waiting for applause. This paralyzing fear turns you into someone you genuinely are not. You start to strategically shape yourself to be exactly what you think he wants. It carefully hides important parts of itself that it deems inconvenient or inappropriate. It becomes progressively smaller, more palatable, more acceptable, more moldable. All this just to minimally increase the chances of finally being chosen. But in this painful process, you lose yourself absolutely and completely. And even if he miraculously chooses you, you'll never really believe it. Because deep down, you know perfectly well that he didn't really choose you. He chose the completely edited, filtered, performative version that you strategically created. The real you remains hidden in the dark, terrified of finally being seen and inevitably rejected. This fear also completely prevents you from making real, conscious choices. You become so intensely focused on being chosen that you totally forget to ask yourself the right questions. But do I really choose him? Does it genuinely do me good? Is this truly the kind of love I want for my life? You cowardly abdicate your own sacred power of choice because you are too busy begging pathetically to be chosen. The naked truth is that this whole fear isn't really about him. It's about the wounded girl inside you who painfully learned that it wasn't enough, that she needed to try too hard, to prove herself constantly, to sacrifice herself repeatedly to deserve crumbs of love. And as long as you don't deeply heal that inner girl, you'll keep giving your precious power to anyone who comes along. Healing this ancestral fear means completely rebuilding your relationship with your own worth. It means finally understanding that you absolutely don't have to be chosen to be valuable. That rejection is definitely not about personal inadequacy. It is simply about natural incompatibility. That true love never requires you to diminish or mutilate. When you finally choose yourself first courageously, his approval is no longer a matter of life and death. Because you already know deeply who you are, it already firmly recognizes its inherent value. And she is genuinely willing to accept only love that fully honors that, not crumbs pathetically disguised as affection, the illusion that he completes you. You grew up hearing over and over again that there is a perfect soulmate waiting for you somewhere, that you're only half of something bigger, and will only be truly complete when you finally find the other half lost. Then he appears in your life and you think with relief, it's him. I finally found my other half. But this is literally one of the most dangerous and destructive lies you can believe. Jung had a radically different view on this. He said emphatically that you are already completely whole. It has always been since the beginning. What really happens is that you've buried and rejected important parts of yourself throughout your life. Parts that have been systematically rejected, harshly criticized, deeply shamed. And when you meet someone who visibly possesses these qualities, you automatically project onto them the powerful illusion of completeness. But absolutely no one can complete you because you are simply not incomplete. You're just painfully disconnected from who you really are deep down. And when you desperately seek completeness in someone else, what you're really doing is cowardly outsourcing the essential work of becoming whole. It is irresponsibly placing on another human being the impossible responsibility of bringing back the precious parts of you that have been lost. This seductive illusion creates an absolutely brutal emotional dependence. If he completes you, you literally can't live without him. If it makes you happy, you can never be happy alone. If it gives you meaning and purpose, you have no reason to exist without it. You literally turn a person halfway, pathetically waiting for someone else to fill the empty and painful space. And worst of all, you inevitably begin to deeply resent him, because absolutely no one can carry indefinitely the crushing weight of being the sole reason for someone else's happiness. It will fail repeatedly. It will constantly disappoint you. It will be merely human. And each time this happens, you feel terribly betrayed, cruelly abandoned, because he is not fulfilling the impossible role of savior that you have unilaterally assigned to him. The hard truth is that genuinely healthy relationships are absolutely not about two halves forming a whole. They are about two already complete integers creating something infinitely greater. It's about two absolutely complete people who consciously choose to share their lives, not because they desperately need to, but because they genuinely want to. Not out of unhealthy necessity, but out of authentic and free desire. When you obsessively seek completeness in another, you're not really seeking true love. You're desperately seeking external salvation. And absolutely no relationship healthily survives this kind of crushing pressure. Because true love is definitely not about filling inner voids. It's about two genuinely whole people who meet freely and consciously decide to walk together. Deep healing begins exactly when you take full responsibility for your own completeness. When you finally understand that all the qualities you passionately admire in him already exist naturally within you, only temporarily dormant. When you definitely stop waiting for someone to save you heroically and courageously decide to save yourself. This requires brutal courage, because it means looking honestly inward and patiently bringing back everything you've left along the way. It means carefully retrieving your genuine strength, your natural independence, your inherent ability to be deeply happy alone. It means finally becoming the extraordinary person you've been desperately hoping to find. And when you do that hard work, something absolutely magical happens naturally. You completely stop seeking external completeness and finally begin to seek only true companionship. You definitely stop needing sickly and freely start choosing. And then finally, you're genuinely ready for true love. One that is born of inner abundance, never desperate lack. Repeating the pattern of your past. Look very closely at it now. Now look carefully back at all the other relationships that have consumed you just like that before. Do you notice anything deeply familiar about this pattern? Perhaps it is absolutely no coincidence. Maybe you're completely stuck in a destructive pattern, compulsively reliving the same painful story with seemingly different characters. Jung understood perfectly that the unconscious has an absolutely compulsive need to repeat patterns, especially that which was painfully unresolved in the past. If you've had an emotionally absent father, you'll inevitably fall in love with emotionally unavailable men. If you grew up desperately seeking approval that simply never came, you'll systematically choose people who make you constantly beg for attention. It's not bad luck or cruel fate, it's the unconscious obsessively trying to heal an extremely old wound. The devastating problem is that your mind consciously believes that this time it will be completely different. This time you will finally get the love you didn't have. This time you will finally prove that you are worthy. This time the story will have the happy ending you've always deserved. But you're just desperately trying to rewrite the painful past through the present, using it as an instrument, and it just never really works. Every time you fall in love with the exact same kind of person, you're actually compulsively returning to the scene of the emotional crime, trying to make something that has never worked and will never work. It's just like watching the same tragic movie over and over again, hoping that the ending will magically change. But the destructive script is written deep inside you, and as long as you don't consciously rewrite it, it will continue to magnetically attract the same actors, Honestly acknowledging the pattern is extremely painful. It means boldly admitting that you have an active part in all of this, that it is not simply a passive victim of fate or cosmic chance, that there is something deep in you that chooses, repeatedly and compulsively, situations that hurt you predictably. And this brutal awareness can be absolutely overwhelming, but it is also profoundly liberating, because when you finally see the pattern clearly, you can consciously break it. When it understands that it is mechanically repeating an extremely old dynamic, it can make radically different choices. You can definitely stop blaming the wrong men and honestly start asking yourself, what exactly about me keeps obsessively choosing this? Breaking the pattern definitely requires you to bravely go back to the source, that he looks without fear at the first wound, the one that completely shaped his way of loving. Maybe it's early abandonment. Maybe it's constant rejection. Perhaps it is the lingering feeling that it has never been genuinely enough. Whatever it is, it's out there, secretly directing your choices without you consciously realizing it. And as long as you don't deeply heal that original wound, you'll automatically choose people who painfully reactivate it. Because the unconscious definitely doesn't want comfort. It wants final resolution. He repeatedly and systematically puts you in the same painful situation, hoping that you will finally learn the lesson, cure the pain definitively, end the cycle once and for all. The true good news: you can terminate now. You can firmly decide that this is definitely the last time you get lost in someone who doesn't choose you. That this is absolutely the last time he confuses unhealthy intensity with true love. That this is categorically the last time he repeats the painful story. But that radically requires you to do it differently this time, that you consciously choose the man who genuinely treats you well, even if he doesn't arouse that familiar addictive obsession, that firmly values emotional stability over dramatic chaos. May she finally learn that genuinely healthy love does not hurt in this devastating way. The pattern only breaks when you absolutely refuse to dance to the same song again. When you consciously choose to get off track and sit down to observe. When you definitely stop chasing the same type of person, expecting magically different results. When you finally understand that real change starts within, never outside. Awakening to true love. After absolutely everything you've discovered so far, you may be sincerely wondering, so what really is true love? If it is not overwhelming obsession, if it is not elaborate fantasy, if it is not this desperate need, what is left? Jung had an absolutely beautiful answer to this. True love is when you can finally see the other person exactly as they are, without distorted projections, without comforting fantasies, without needing them to fill your inner voids. It is when you are so deeply whole that you can offer love from a place of genuine abundance, never desperate need. True love doesn't consume you destructively. It expands you wonderfully. It does not diminish you progressively. It strengthens you deeply. It doesn't trap you in obsessive thoughts. It frees you completely to live fully. It is a love that is born of absolutely conscious choice, not of blind and unconscious compulsion. Genuine and real admiration, not completely distorted projection. And to finally arrive at that kind of love, you need to make your way back to yourself. He needs to patiently rescue all the parts he has projected onto others. You need to lovingly fill the voids with your own integral presence. You need to courageously heal the wounds that make you repeat destructive patterns relentlessly. This is definitely not easy. It means painfully letting go of fantasy and embracing raw reality. It means accepting that absolutely no one is going to save you heroically, magically complete you, heal you miraculously. It means taking full and absolute responsibility for your entire emotional life, for your repetitive patterns, for your conscious and unconscious choices. But when you finally do that, when you finally become genuinely whole, something absolutely miraculous happens naturally. You completely stop desperately chasing love and start attracting love naturally. Definitively stop begging for attention pathetically and start choosing healthy reciprocity. Completely stop losing yourself in others and finally begin to find yourself in true relationships. True love isn't about dramatic intensity at all. It's about comforting consistency. It's not about temporarily overwhelming passion. It's about solidly built partnership. It's not about needing unhealthily. It's about wanting freely. And there is an absolutely huge difference between all these things. When you finally awaken to this, you realize to your surprise that you have spent entire years completely confusing suffering with love, naively thinking that if it didn't hurt terribly, it wasn't real, that if it didn't consume you completely, it wasn't deep. But you were measuring love by the completely wrong metric all along. The love that consumes you is fire that burns fast and turns to cold ashes. The love that nourishes you is ember that warms you comfortably for years, and you genuinely deserve the ember, not the destructive fire. So if you're obsessed with someone right now, use that as a revealing mirror. Look carefully at everything this obsession is showing you about yourself, about its deep emptiness, its old wounds, its repetitive patterns, and instead of desperately trying to win that person over, bravely win yourself back. Carefully bring in all the qualities you project onto him. Lovingly fill the voids with genuine self-care, deep self-knowledge, constant self-presence. Courageously break the standards by making absolutely conscious choices. And above all, finally learn that you are already complete. You have always been from the beginning. You will always be eternally. When you do that, when you really awaken, you're going to look back and realize clearly, it was never real love. It was just the insistent call of your soul urgently asking you to come home, to the only place where true love really begins, deep within yourself.